So we want to focus our discussion today on this question. Exactly who are these rebels? To answer that, I did some research and went to the top two people behind the decision to get involved in Libya in the first place, President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton. Let's hear what they say about who the rebels are.
The people that we've met with have been fully vetted, so we have a clear sense of who they are, and so far they're saying the right things, and most of them are professionals, lawyers, doctors, people who appear to be credible.
We do not have any specific information about specific individuals from any organization who are part of this, but of course we're still getting to know those who are leading the Transitional National Council, and that will be a process that continues.
So it seems to me we might not really know who they are. So we are trusting, though, that they're worth helping, devoting our time, our weapons, our resources. A lot of people wondering just how far our help will go. Will we train the rebels? Will we give them weapons? President Obama? Secretary Clinton?
Are you ruling out U.S. military hardware assistance?
I'm not ruling it out, but I'm also not ruling it in.
It is our interpretation that 1973 amended or overrode the absolute prohibition of arms to anyone in Libya, so that there could be legitimate transfer of arms if a country were to choose to do that.
Gosh, I just don't feel like I'm getting any definitive answers here. So instead, let's bring in someone into the conversation who knows what things at least look like from the front lines. Not in Libya, but this is a man who's made some tough decisions and has experienced firsthand the small successes and also the large-scale horrors of war. Nathan Sassaman is a retired United States Army officer. He was stationed in Iraq in the early months of the war. He's also the author of this book, The Warrior King, The Triumph and Betrayal of an American Commander in Iraq. Hey there, Nathan. Let's talk about what's going on here. Why don't I have you put this in some practical terms? The intervening, the airstrikes, the support of the rebels. What will come out of this?
Well, thanks, Christine, for having me on. I think right off the bat, we need to have some very clear military objectives, probably some very good follow-on objectives and an exit strategy. I don't think anybody feels comfortable with that whole trifecta of reasons right now.
You know, we look around to what else is going on in the world. We can point to things here at home, of course, unemployment, the economy, the breaking down of infrastructure. But, you know, we can't ignore what's going on in these other wars that we're involved in. Just yesterday, in Iraq, a targeted and sophisticated attack into Crete. This is, of course, the hometown of former dictator Saddam Hussein. But 50 people were killed, including a journalist. So then we have what we're seeing in Libya, which, I mean, frankly, at times it seems like, at least what's going on in the ground, you look and it looks like gangs of heavily armed people shooting at one another. How do you think the U.S. is handling the balance of involvement in some very, very different conflicts?
Well, we're into the withdrawal period in Iraq, and you know we have to be out of there by 2011, and there's going to be a cause and effect that goes along with that withdrawal. On the flip side, I think in Libya, just from my personal knowledge from 2003 and 2004, there's going to be a period of time where you're trying to figure out, you know, who's in charge, who's really genuine, who's really interested in the goals of the future of Libya, and then who's really corrupt and out for selfish gain. And you're not going to gain that from bombing them from 20,000 feet above the air or less. You're going to only gain that from boots on the ground. And frankly, there's not enough out there right now to justify sending American sons and daughters into harm's way in Libya.
But Nathan, you talk about you know, the drawdown in Iraq, the fact that it should be sort of nearing its end. But then I just got to go back to this attack to Crete. I mean, this is serious. And how do we know that these kind of things aren't going to continue to happen there as we continue to, you know, draw down?
Sure, we don't. And you know, you have to remember in 2003 when we entered Iraq, there was already a level of violence, a daily violence that occurred there. And I am certain that when we withdraw at the end of 2011, those attacks you saw yesterday, you're going to see more and more of those kinds of things happening. And then it will be interesting to see, is the United States going to stand by and watch the fledgling democracy work through that, or are we going to have to put, step back in at some point?
I want to pick your brain a little bit and talk also about the similarities between these two places. You've been to Iraq, you've been to some pretty tough situations. What do you think American people should know about, the tribal mentality that exists in much of the Middle East and Africa?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, it's brother against brother until there's somebody else, and then it's brother and brother versus cousin, and the next thing it's village against province, and then it's province against country. So the tribal lines run very, very deep. They cross over the political and religious views or lines that are in those Middle Eastern countries, and your allegiance is going to go back to the tribe. And so it's a vastly complex environment for young leaders to have to make decisions from outside that culture to deal with.
I mean, it seems from the stories that I've heard, people who have been, to similar places you've been, in similar situations in Iraq in the earlier days, I think a lot of people were shocked when they saw that, people live in very different ways there. They act in very different ways, and, in their eyes, we act in very different ways. Any advice or insights as you've been watching over the last 12 days what's been going on in Libya? Have any of those dots been connecting for you in terms of the, what we don't know?
Right. I think we have to be very, very careful who we trust. And it was, we did huge military operations over there in Iraq based on the information from maybe one or two supposedly credible sources. And in fact, in the aftermath, they were never credible to begin with. So it's no pun intended. It's almost a minefield that you have to walk through in Libya and determine who we can trust and who we can't. But I don't think we're in any position to take the rebel side or take the government side and to insert ground forces. I mean, that is a debate Congress is going to have to take on in the coming days and weeks.
And Nathan, I want to keep you here a little longer. But we want to kind of look into this. Just staying on the topic of Libya, we should, of course, bring up that the West has formally handed control of the mission over to NATO today. But America is set to remain heavily involved by continuing to invest millions into the operation. For one